our 4-week January Back to Basics series. So I know you guys all taking notes because we've been here every one of the 4 weeks, and you're now an expert on the Science of Mind textbook. So what we're doing in these 4 weeks is we're looking at Ernest Holmes' seminal work, The Science of Mind, and this is the textbook that outlines basically the philosophy, one of the cornerstones of New Thought. And when he wrote this book in 1938, is the version we're using, the first 4 chapters served as kind of an executive summary, if you will, of his entire philosophy. And so the last 3 weeks and today, I've done a little synopsis of the 4 weeks. And what we said in the first week we talked about the thing itself. And what that was is it talked about the nature of God. And what I said about that is that God is a principle. God is not a human being or anything like a human being. It is so beyond a human being. It is a principle that works on immutable laws, just like gravity, activated by our thoughts. And so I invited all of us to get rid of our idea of Santa God, who's keeping the naughty and nice list, only instead of presents or coal, it's heaven or hell. I said that that's a conception of the human mind that needed to have something to relate to, but that is not the true nature of God. God is a principle. And then in week 2, the way it works, I talked about how God is always working for good. God is always working for good. It's a force of positive energy and well-being that we are allowing or not. But there's no source of evil. There's just good that we are letting into our lives or we are holding ourselves apart from. Because this principle of good works through us, and it gives us as much as we can conceive. So if we can only conceive a little good, we get a little good. If we conceive negativity, we get negativity. If we conceive all good things, we get all good things. And then last week, we talked about what it does. And what we said is that what God does is it creates. God constantly creates. And it creates through the mechanism of an infinite mind that has all thought and all potentiality operating at the same time. And quantum physics has now proven how this works. But that we tap into a channel through our individual minds. So now you're all up to speed. Everybody has a real firm handle on that, right? We operate on it, we use it in our lives, we know how it works, my work here is done, right? That's what I actually, I just returned from 3 days in Southern California where I was speaking in a very corporate setting with very corporate speakers. One of the people was the nutritionist for Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition. One of them was does a talk called Lead Like Reagan. He was one of Reagan's staffers, and pretty big name people. And I was there, and as I was sitting in the audience listening to this, thinking, I'd love to speak more in corporate settings. How do I adapt what I have to say? I don't. Because everything I just told you, I heard from these corporate speakers in almost those exact words. And I thought, this is such a practical philosophy. Ernest Holmes gave us this practical thing that we can take religion and bring it into the rest of the world and use it in our lives. And that's what today's topic is how to use it. How to use it. So all this theory is great. God's a principle, works through us. That's awesome. How do we use it? Now, Ernest Holmes would say that we use it through spiritual practice. We have to practice. It's like any tool. We may not know how to use it right away. We have to practice with it a little bit. I watch my husband. My husband is a master chef, and he loves knives. Scared me a little bit before we got married, but he loves knives, and that man can cut anything. He can cut a tomato the width of a piece of paper. I mean, he's amazing with those knives. And he's left-handed, so to watch him do it is like, I can't even try to learn. He didn't do that like that. He's taken classes so that now he can wield this knife that's like, this big, just chop up rosemary without ever getting close to his fingers, I stand back and go. But he practiced. He practiced. He loves it, and he practiced. And that's what we have to do. We have to practice this. It doesn't come naturally. Our culture tells us there's tons of negativity. Our culture has given us a conception of God that has been brought down through millennia that has been written and rewritten and reinterpreted through the human filter, well-meaning human filters, but human filters nevertheless. And so it's not something that we can just grok. It's something we really have to feel into. So how we use these principles is we get still and we listen to that still small voice within. Now, how do we know that that still small voice is God and not our mother? It feels good. It feels good. It feels good. So, the first thing we have to do to use these principles of God is we have to convince ourselves that what we want is possible. Now that sounds like, well, that's easy. I really want it, so it's possible. But it's not as easy. Ernest Holmes says it's simple, but it's not easy. Because we may really want something, and we could have a lifetime of being told we can't have it, or we shouldn't have it, or we don't deserve it, or what makes you think, or why would someone want to hear you, or whatever those old messages we got are. So we have to convince ourselves that those old messages are not the truth and tap into what we know is the truth, which is that God is a principle that works on immutable laws. It's always working for good, and it's always creating more good through us. So we have to convince ourselves that what we want is possible because of that. So I have to tell you guys have all heard about, the 4-minute mile. You know what the 4-minute mile was. For centuries, human beings did not think they could move fast enough to run a mile in 4 minutes. That's about 15 miles an hour. Back in the late 1790s, when train travel first started in England at the time, in England, and the train could go 30 miles an hour, all the pundits thought that humans shouldn't ride on this, that it would compress our heart if we went 30 miles an hour, that there was no way that rate of speed was healthy for us. I just got off a plane, I still sometimes wonder how healthy it is. But through the centuries, the idea of the human body moving at 15 miles an hour was something that daredevils and dreamers wanted, but no one could break it. And in the first part of the 20th century, that was kind of everyone's goals, to break the 4-minute mile, break the 4-minute mile, break all the athletes, all the top class runners, everybody wanted to break the 4-minute mile. Didn't happen until 1954, when Sir Roger Bannister, well, he wasn't Sir then, he was just Roger Bannister, broke the 4-minute mile. I read an account of when he finished, and the announcer said, Roger Bannister, time 3, and you couldn't hear the rest of it, because as soon as the audience heard 3, they just started clapping, and it was 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds or something, but he broke the 4-minute mile. But that's not what's so amazing. That same year, 3 other people broke the 4-minute mile. Why? Why for centuries have human beings not been able to break the 4-minute mile, and then suddenly 4 people in the same year do it? Because suddenly human beings are faster, stronger, bigger? They convinced themselves it was possible. Roger Bannister showed that it was possible, and everyone followed it. As of 2013, over 1,300 people have broken the 4-minute mile, officially. That's not, the guy training out on his own track. That's official records. Once we convince ourselves it's possible, then we are using that law, that thing, that principle that works through us, to channel it through our own thoughts to achieve it. Once we convince ourselves it's possible, it's done. God gives us exactly what we want once we believe we can do it. But usually we're our own problems. We're the ones who stand in the way because we don't believe we can do it, or that we should do it, or that we deserve it. But we can convince ourselves it's possible through spiritual practice. The next thing we have to do to use the law is we have to deny the condition. Ernest Holmes says all through there, you must deny the condition, you must deny the condition. Now this has gotten misused in New Thought. There's a joke, I love this. A priest, a rabbi, and a religious science minister are out on the golf course. And they're out playing golf, and lightning hits and strikes all 3 of them and wipes them out. And they end up in hell. And they get to hell, and Satan is there to meet. Of course, disclaimer, we don't believe in Satan, we don't believe in hell, this is a joke. Anyway, Satan is there to meet them, and he sees the rabbi first, and the rabbi goes, well, I have to say, I'm quite disappointed to be here. First of all, Jews don't even believe in hell, and we just didn't believe this was true, and I was a good man my whole life, and I did everything by the law, but I did have a weakness for bacon. I guess now I understand. And so then Satan turns to the Catholic priest, and the Catholic priest says, I too am distraught to be here. I can't believe I'm here, but I did have a passion for that sacramental wine. I think maybe that got in my way. Such is life. And the religious science minister looked at Satan, closed his eyes, and said, I'm not here and it's not hot. I'm not here and it's not hot. I'm not here and it's not hot. This is not what I mean by denial. I think the reason that New Thought no longer uses the term denial is because that is the way it's come to be seen. It comes a lot, I think, from 12-step programs. You're in denial about this, you're in denial. It's a psychological term that you're not accepting reality. That is not the way Ernest Holmes used it. Ernest Holmes used it to say that we deny that the condition out there can have any control over the way we live our lives. We deny that we can't have what we want because, oh, I can't get this job because I never went to college. I can't do this because I'm too old. I'm not allowed to do this because I'm a woman. There are stipulations of living in this world, but it doesn't mean we can't have what we want within those parameters. There's a motivational speaker named Nick Vujicic. I have to always think about how to say his name because he's Serbian and Australian, and so his last name is spelled with a lot of J's and K's, and it's pronounced Vujicic. He was born without limbs. You guys may have heard of him or seen him on YouTube. He has a genetic order, he has no limbs. Now, he was born an evangelical Christian, and he believed in miracles, and so he was praying that God grew limbs for him. He actually went and bought a pair of shoes and set the pair of shoes in his closet when he was in junior high school, waiting for the moment that God grew his legs back. And while he was waiting for this miracle to happen, he decided to get on with his life. And so he got involved in school. He ran for student government and became the president of the student government at his high school. He started doing fundraisers for athletes with disabilities. He started then working on talking to people about his disability and how he wasn't going to let it stop him. He started a nonprofit called Life Without Limbs that raised money for supportive resources, you know, like prosthetic limbs and things, wheelchairs and things like that for people without limbs. He was voted by the nation of Australia, the Young Australian of the Year, about 10 years ago. So what he realized, and then he became a motivational speaker, what he realized is that praying for God to grow his limbs was like the minister going, it's not here and I'm not hot, it's not here and I'm not hot. He was using his lack of limbs as a reason for not living his life and thought he couldn't get on with it until he grew limbs. But then he woke up and he denied the fact that he had no limbs as a factor to control his life. He realized that he could have a full and gorgeous life without limbs. Exactly what his own nonprofit was teaching people. So when we deny the condition, it doesn't mean that we stick our head in the sand and we say it doesn't exist and we act like nothing's there. This is the world. We have taken form in this three-dimensional world to express and experience God. And as part of that experience, sometimes we experience things that our human mind judges as wrong or bad or negative. But we can deny that that condition has any power to keep us from living a full and loving and peaceful and joyful and passionate life. So we deny the condition. We don't deny the reality. We deny the condition. I do get upset when sometimes New Thoughters, in a moment of weakness might admit that maybe they aren't perfect and say, I have something going on. And the New Thought community around goes, well, what's in your consciousness? Drives me crazy. We have to acknowledge that there is something in our world that we're up against. But through spiritual practice, we get to use that power of God to realize that that condition doesn't have any power over the life we want to live. And then finally, the way we use it is we have to think a new reality. We have to think a new reality. Everything is twice created, first in thought and then in form. So we have to be able to conceive it before it can take form for us. But that's really hard because what is very prevalent in our life. We're up against it all the time. We see what is in front of our face, and we think that that's the way it always must be. There's a great quote from Henry Ford on leadership. He said, someone said, "Did you really know that the people wanted the Model A?" And he said, "If I'd asked the people what they wanted, they'd have said they wanted a faster horse." So Henry Ford didn't look at what is and say, how do we improve horsepower in the literal horse sense? He had to think a new reality. And then the place where I actually heard that quote is Steve Jobs' biography, because he's the one that used that quote. Steve Jobs, I'm thrilled that movie was nominated for all these Academy Awards. I thought that was awesome. In case you didn't know, they're all supporting actor. It's awesome. But he thought a new reality. He didn't say, how can I make a better flip phone? How can I have a sleeker flip phone? He said, how can we reconceptualize how people interact with technology? And by rethinking how human beings interact with technology, he thought a whole new reality that now is kind of like the Jetsons. I mean, remember as a little kid, those of you about my age, you'd watch the Jetsons and you'd watch Mr. Spacely talk to George Jetson on the TV phone, and that just seemed like a million miles away. Now it's called FaceTime. Thank you, Steve Jobs. Every one of us can take out our iPhone right now and FaceTime our relatives in New York or Pennsylvania, make sure they're not buried in snow, and, because Steve Jobs, he thought a new reality, and then he took it into being. And Spirit met him. This principle of God, this new reality of iPhones and iPads and Apple TV and, MacBook Pros and all of this, and then all the other resources that have followed, all the other manufacturers who have followed, this has always existed in that infinite mind that we talked about last week. The potential for this has been around as long as humankind has, but it had to be channeled through one individual mind that could think reality differently. And so Steve Jobs was able to think reality differently. And so when we look at the overall teaching of Science Mind, when we kind of conclude this idea of back to basics, we get to think a new reality about God. And now as I say that, I think you guys all realize that this is simple but not easy. God is someone, something that we all think we know what it's about. I actually talked recently to someone who's been in this teaching a while, who said to me, I'm not sure why God did this to me. And I said, God didn't do this to you, you did this to you. And let me guess, while you were doing it, something in your gut said, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. And this person said, well, that's right. I said, that was God. That was God. That was God saying, I love you. Oh, that's going to leave a mark. But we have free will. We have choice. These laws, we can use them or not. We can use these principles and have our lives change. We can convince ourselves that what we want is possible. We can deny conditions to have any power over us. We can think a new reality into being. We can do that, and when we do that, our lives work. Or we can throw up our hands and say, I don't think that's what God wants. Who am I? I'm just this little tiny person in this little tiny town, in this little tiny state, in this pretty big country. And who am I to do this? I mean, this is a job for Mother Teresa or somebody. No. God's with each one of us. calling us to that, to think that new reality, giving us ideas, throwing ideas at us. And when we go astray, it's that loving little sickness in our gut going, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be doing this. But we don't listen because our brains, God love them, get in the way. We talk ourselves out of our feelings. And when we talk ourselves out of our feelings, we forget how to use this principle of God. We use the world. Jesus said, be in the world, but not of it. We need to operate in this world. If we don't have limbs, we need to operate in this world without limbs. If we don't have money, we need to not spend money. We need to operate in this world, but we have to recognize that not having money doesn't stop us from what we want to do. We need to recognize that only being 5 feet tall doesn't stop us from playing basketball. We need to realize that these conditions around us, we can move around because we can think into being a new reality. And that's how we use it. So as we go into the week, now we've completed, we're going to talk next week about putting it all together and how to put this into use in our life in a very practical way all together. But now that we've completed it, know that the thing itself is this principle of love. And that it operates through these laws, through us. And that the way it works is by giving us good and always projecting good into the world. And allowing us the free will to step into that stream of good and let it pour over us. Or stand fearfully on the sidelines and watch it pour over everyone else. And what it does is it creates. It creates, it creates, it creates, it creates, but it's got to create through us. That infinite mind, we have to grab the idea. Steve Jobs had to grab the new reality. Not everyone could do that. But he could and he did. And now we all benefit from it. And then how to use it is we have to be in spiritual practice. We have to remember this. We have to reread it. Read something every day that reminds you that this is possible. We have to convince ourselves that what we want is possible, that we deserve it, that we're supposed to have it. And then we have to deny that not having it has any power over us. And then we have to be able to think that in reality and believe in it and put all of our resources and all of our energy and all of our attention and all of our passion behind it. And that is the philosophy of the science mind. Let's pray. So join me in spiritual practice. Let's use this thing. So let's take a moment to feel into that heart place, that place where there is a still small voice. Let's breathe into that spot where we recognize that there is something greater than we are, where we actually feel its presence, whether it's in our heart or our solar plexus or our throat or our gut, wherever in you, you know that you're connected. You know that there's good for you and you ought to have it. Wherever that is, take a moment and just bring your awareness to it. Breathe into it. Focus your attention on it so much that you magnify it right now. And as we recognize that this power, this presence, this omnipotence lives in us, moves through us, we also recognize that it is always here for good for us. And we know that we have access to it at every moment. We can use these principles. They are as easy as stopping to take a breath. Stopping at the stoplight to breathe into God. Stopping in the middle of an argument to take that deep breath. Stopping when we're unsure what to do. To remind ourselves that everything we want is possible. That there is no condition that can have any power over us. And that the minute we can think of a way to move forward, it is done. The road rises up to meet us. And so I recognize right here and right now that that divine spirit is operating through each one of us in this room. Indeed, each one of us in this town, each one of us on this planet. I accept and know that that power and presence moves through us and that we just let it be. We get out of our way. We feel into it. And we claim every good thing in our lives. I know for each of us that we are emanations of that one life, and so we are here with something great to do. And there is nothing standing in our way, because we have these principles, we have the principle of God with us in every moment. And so I know that each one of us goes into the rest of this day anchored in spirit, anchored in the truth, anchored in the knowing that all is well. And I speak a special word for the Denver Broncos today, knowing that they know this too. That they know that they can think the reality of themselves as champions into being, and it is done. And so I just accept for each of us that this day and this week is blessed. We are one with infinite intelligence. We are one with infinite love. We are one with that infinite principle of God that is all-powerful. We are one with it. We move toward it. We allow it to operate in our lives. And as we do so, every condition in our lives opens up to allow us the smooth sailing and the clear path to exactly what we want. And knowing that each one of us is blessed in this way and so many other ways, I can just give thanks. I open my heart in gratitude for the principle that works always, always, always. I give thanks for the consciousness of each person present, because I know that without anyone, this current reality would be a little dimmer and would definitely be changed. And so from this place of gratitude, I release these words into that law, into that alchemy that is all love, operating through all law, that works on these words and makes them so by the very principles that Ernest Holmes taught. And because I am so grateful to know that this is how it works, I can just relax and know that it is done. I let it go in absolute faith and trust, knowing that all is well. Please join me in anchoring that with the words, and so it is. Thank you. Yes. Now, if our ushers will